Welcome to this webinar on how to write a book to boost your profile and build your business. I'm Jane Turner from writewithjane.com. I'm an author coach, a publisher, and the author of 4 books, including Mindset for Authors, How to Overcome Perfectionism, Procrastination, and Self-Doubt. And I'll be telling you more about this image of me that you're looking at now when we get to the section on how to build your profile off the back of your book. Now, this is what we'll be covering in this session. But what I want to say to you is that in a moment, I'll be sharing a screen that shows you the times where each of these sections of the webinar start. Because if you're anything like me, you might want to go straight to the part that you're particularly interested in. So if you'd like to jump over the foundational piece where I'm talking about the rationale for writing a book to build your business, you can fast forward to a little bit after the 8-minute point, and you'll be hearing about how to get started. But if you want to go straight into the section about publishing, then you'll find that a little bit after the 16-minute point. Or if it's monetizing your content that you're interested in, you'll find that at a little bit after the 27-minute point. And then we cover the question of promoting your book through speaking opportunities or possibly free publicity. And that's a little bit after the 33-minute point. And then last but not least, after the 51-minute point, I'm going to be hooking you back into your sense of purpose. So those are some of the shortcuts that you can take. But if you want to watch the whole webinar, we kick off with this question, why? What exactly is your motivation for wanting to write a book? Now, I've got a lot of insight into this question because I've run over 65 live events and about 40 virtual events on how to build credibility and authority by becoming a published author. And I always ask the audience why. And I phrase it with particular words. And those words are, what do you want? And here are the things that I hear time and time again. People tell me that they want a step-by-step plan. They don't want to be confused and overwhelmed. They want a degree of certainty about the fact that if they put the work in a strategic and organized way, then they'll have a bookshop-ready book in their hands within a reasonable time frame. And they want certainty and confidence. They want to know that their book is going to be one that they can be proud of and that it's going to achieve the goals that they've written it for. And people tell me that they want to increase their visibility and authority. They're sick of seeing their competitors getting the clients that they know they could help, but those clients aren't signing up with them because they've never even heard of them yet. And why is that? Because they don't have the visibility and authority that their competitors have because of the way they've managed to leverage their status as a published author to be known as the go-to person in their field. And there's this question of satisfaction. Now, I can't tell you how satisfying it feels to finally hold that book that you've written in your hand. Not to mention how wonderful it is when you start getting feedback from people who've read your book saying things like, I wasn't expecting to get all of my problems solved when I picked up your book, but I'm blown away because I've found the missing piece of the puzzle that I've been looking for years. Now, you and I know that you're writing your book for a reason, and we get really clear on what that reason is right up front, because we want to make sure that you write the kind of book that's going to give you a solid return on investment. And that's the investment of time and potentially money that you spend in the process of getting your book written and published. And now I want to turn the focus back onto you by asking you a question. And that question is, what's stopping you from getting your book written? And I hear the same answers to that question over and over again. And the big one for people is that they feel like they don't have enough time. Now, the thing is that we all have 24 hours in a day, no more and no less. So I can't help you in terms of giving you more time, but what I can do is help you to save a lot of time. And I do that by giving you a structure to work within and a strategy to get the information out of your head and onto the page in a really efficient and effective way. And then there's this question of lack of confidence. So it's about building your confidence to the point where you can get the book written, no matter what's going on inside your head. And then there's this question of not knowing where to start. Now, this is a big deal for people who've been wanting to write a book for ages, but never seem to be able to get it done. So what I'll be doing in a moment is sharing a strategy with you to get you off the starting blocks. And I also hear things like fear of failure, or for that matter, fear of success. Now, people don't necessarily say those actual words, but what the words they say mean is that they're worried about what people are going to think about them. Maybe some of their family members or their old friends are going to think that they're big noting themselves. Or they might be worried about, what if my book doesn't work? What if I bomb out and my book just isn't any good? Now, this kind of thing really resonates with me because these are the kinds of thoughts that cost me 5 years and over $30,000 in various writing programs and retreats and what have you, because I had a niggling doubt in the back of my head that was stopping me from getting my first book out into the market. And essentially, that's what got me into the business that I'm running now, which is all about helping first-time authors to get their books finished, because I don't want anyone else essentially chasing their tail because they think they're not good enough. And that leads into this tendency that we have about not wanting to reach out and get help. Now, looking back on my own 5-year journey, I just think, wow, what a waste of time. And why didn't I get the right kind of help earlier? And I want you to really think about this. Why would you choose to sit in a place of overwhelm and uncertainty when a phone call with someone like me could make all of the difference? So if you get nothing else out of listening to this webinar, but the link to the schedule that I'll be sharing with you later, and if you do nothing else but book yourself in for a complimentary strategy session with me, then you'll be streets ahead of the 99% of the people who say that they want to write a book, but never actually get it done. So what you're looking at now is the screen that you'll be seeing popping up from time to time during this webinar. And the point of this screen is to give you an opportunity to just pause and reflect on what you've just heard and relate it back to your own situation. So what we're going to do now is look at the question of how to get started. And what we do is we start with the end in mind. You want to get crystal clear about who you're writing this book for and what they need to hear from you so that they keep reading the book and don't just discard it after reading the introduction, and potentially sign up to be working with you at some stage. So what are they wanting to move away from? What do they want less of in their life? What problem is it that your book is going to be solving for them? And what are they moving toward? What do they want more of in their life? What solutions are you able to offer them within the pages of your book? Getting clear about these things is the key to writing a book that will resonate with your target audience and get the results that you've written it for. And once we're clear on that point, we look at the question of structure. And we do this by way of learning styles methodology. And what that is all about is the fact that all of us will have one way that we lean towards to make sense of the world. And we're not going to go into a whole lot of depth about that here, except to say that some of us will be why learners. Some of us are what learners, some are how learners, and some are what if learners. So what does that mean, you might be thinking? Well, your why learners are about 35% of the population. These people love discussion. And if they pick up your book in a bookshop, they're going to be thinking, well, why should I care? How is this book going to help me? So for you to really connect with your why learners, a sentence that starts like this will be very powerful. I share this information with you because. And it could be something like, I share this with you because I don't want you going down the same raggedy road that I went down when I was writing my first book. So that's just a snapshot of the characteristics of your why learners. And now we're going to take a look at the what learners. These guys are 22% of the population. They love information. They thrive on data and facts. In fact, they love what you're looking at now, dot points. And they really get a lot out of things like graphs and case studies. And they'll immediately connect with a sentence that starts like this. What I cover in this book is, or what you'll be learning about in this chapter is. And then we've got the how learners. They're about 18% of the population. So they're the smallest group, but you certainly don't want to be missing out on the opportunity to connect with 18% of your target audience. And they love activity. They're the people in a workshop who'll feel great when the facilitator says something like, we're going to break off into groups of 3 now. One of you will be role playing the coach, one of you will be the client, and one of you will be the observer. Now, if you're anything like me, you'll be one of the people in the audience who go, oh my God, not another breakout session. But the how learners, on the other hand, are going to feel like it's Christmas. They love this stuff because they'll be thinking to themselves, how can I use this information in my own case? So if you're a how learner, you probably like the fact that I deliberately ask you to pause and reflect on how you're going to apply the information that I share with you when you see the black screen on this webinar. And your how learners really connect with a sentence that starts like this. You'll get the most out of reading this book if you ... And it might be something like, you'll get the most out of reading this book if you're prepared to get out of your comfort zone and try looking at things differently. So that's your how learners. And now we're going to look at the what if learners. These people are 25% of the population, and they love questions. And if you're giving what if learners some information about, for example, how to get out of a negative mindset, they might be thinking, well, okay, that's pretty interesting, but what if I do it this way and not the way that you just told me? Now, you see, your what if learners are really creative people, and we don't want to be brushing their creativity aside. But what we need to be aware of is that the what if learners are also fantastic procrastinators. And they might be thinking this, well, what if I don't do it at all? Now, I'm a bit of a what if learner myself. And for that very reason, I'm really good at addressing this question in my books. And in Mindset for Authors, for example, I've got some places where I get the reader to pause and answer a question or two. And this actually has the same effect on the reader as it has on you when you see the dark screen pop up. It's about getting someone to pause and have a chance to reflect on what they've just heard or seen or read back onto their own situation. So to address the what if learners in Mindset for Authors, I said this, and I'm going to actually quote it. If you're anything like I used to be, you're probably thinking that you're going to skip over these questions and come back to them later. But you and I both know that that's probably not going to happen. So what I want you to do is take the time to answer the questions now. And I promise that by doing that, you'll be really embedding the information that I just shared, and you'll be able to recall it much more readily than you would if you skip over the questions. So can you see how something like that would really resonate with a what if learner? It's as if I'm tipping my hat to them and acknowledging them and helping them to see unconsciously that this book is taking their needs into consideration. I want you to know about learning styles, because if you're not across this material, then there's a good chance that you'll write a book that will connect really well with people who are just like you, but leave the other 3/4 or so of your potential readership feeling a bit nonplussed about your book. They're certainly not going to be referring it on to other people, and they're probably not going to accept the call to action that the book is offering them to sign up to your, perhaps it's an online program, or to have a complimentary session with you or something like that. Or worst case scenario, they won't even be buying your book in the first place. And that's why I share this information about learning styles with you, because knowing it will make it a lot easier for you to keep checking in to make sure that you're using language that will connect with all of the learning styles. So, are you getting a sense of how you can make learning styles work in the context of writing and structuring your book? Now, don't worry if it doesn't feel completely clear yet, because you can certainly use the scheduling link that you'll find at the end of this webinar to book in for a session with me, and we can go through it together, focusing on the book that you're writing. So now we're going to be moving on to take a look at the publishing landscape. And I love this topic because there's never been a better time for people like you and me to be able to publish our books. And I say that because we've got 3 options these days. There's the traditional publishers, the hybrid version of publishing, and there's self-publishing. So we're going to start off by looking at the traditional publishers. And the first thing I need to fill you in on is the fact that these publishers can be notoriously difficult to get a foot in the door with. They are serious business people, and they only take on books that they know are going to sell really well, because they don't want to be backing someone whose book isn't going to bring them in a really significant amount of revenue through sales. So if you're someone who wants to go down the traditional route, what you need to do is craft up a well-written pitch. But in some cases, publishing houses won't accept an approach directly from an author because they want you to go through an agent. So it's actually an agent that you might be pitching yourself to. But in either case, your pitch needs to convince them that you can produce a book that will make them money. Because as I said a moment ago, they are serious business people, and they'll be doing a risk analysis on you. They want to know how big your following is. And in the publishing world, that's called your author platform. How many followers do you have on social media? How many subscribers are on your database? And what capacity do you have to drive traffic to your book and promote it through both social and traditional media? So it's a pretty high bar they set, but if you feel like you can jump it, then the first thing you should do is have a look at their website, because they'll either tell you that they're not accepting submissions at the moment, or if they are, they'll tell you what you need to submit and what format you need to submit it in. But before you do anything, you want to get your head around the pros and cons of working with the traditional publishers. Now, the biggest pro to my mind is that you're not going to have to invest any money in an editor or a cover designer or a layout artist or a proofreader, because these costs are all picked up by the publishers. And the other thing is that there's a lot of kudos in being published by one of the traditional publishing houses. But on the downside, publishing your book this way takes a lot of the control out of your hands. It'll be the publishers who decide, for example, what your cover is going to look like. And it'll be the publishers who decide what commission on sales revenue is going to come back to you. And importantly, it's the publisher who decides what the time frame is going to look like. And this is often a deal breaker for people, because let's say you land a publishing deal at the beginning of 2022, then it's likely that your book won't come out onto the market before 2023. And it could even take longer than that, because you're being slotted into the publisher's schedule. And from where I sit, that's definitely one of the downsides of going with a traditional publisher. So by comparison, there's the hybrid style of publishing. And this is where my Power Writers publishing group sits. Now, I could actually be called a publishing service provider because what I do is I accept a fee for the service that I provide by producing a bookshop ready book for my clients. And they can either use their own name or they can use the Power Writers Publishing Group as the publisher, or they can use the name of their business for that matter. It's about whatever works best for them from a branding and credibility point of view. Because essentially, publishing a book is a project management scenario, and my people will be looking after the cover design for you. And we take care of all of the fiddly bits like your ISBN number, your barcode, your imprint page where you're asserting your copyright, and any disclaimer that you might want to add. And we look after the layout of the internal pages, as well as organising print-on-demand arrangements and setting you up with international distribution for your book. So that way, you're maintaining control of all of the important decision points, and you're paying me or any of the other publishing service providers out there for the services that I mentioned a moment ago. Now, some of the hybrid publishers do all of what I just described that my company does, but as well as getting paid for that service, they also take a share of the revenue. And they might also have some conditions in place in terms of how you can use the material in the book. So it's important that you know what you're getting yourself into with both the hybrid version of publishing and the traditional publishers. So as far as the pros and cons go, a massive pro with a hybrid option is that people like me can get your book out onto the market in a matter of weeks. And there's the fact that you receive a professionally published book while maintaining all of the rights to making decisions about the design of your cover, or how you use the material in the book, or what price you sell the book for that matter. Because you might have a strategy in mind where you'll be giving away a free chapter of the book as a lead magnet, possibly. Or you might even be giving away the whole book at workshops that you run. But the traditional publishers and potentially some of the hybrid publishers will have a contract that could preclude that kind of thing. What's more, if you go with a traditional publisher, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to print copies of your book off for your own use at cost price. So let's get really clear about what this means. In the case of my authors, the cost price of their book is about $5 to $6 per book. So if they want a print run of 100, let's say, they'll be looking at around $600. But on the other hand, if they're going with the traditional publishers, they'll be looking at a couple of $1,000 because the traditional publishers are going to be selling you your book back at the retail value minus your commission and perhaps a little bit more of a discount there. So this is a big deal for a lot of the people who use my services because they want to be keeping all of the revenue from the books that they sell directly from their website or when they're speaking at an event or whatever. Meanwhile, the downside with the hybrid style of publishing is that you're going to need to come up with the funds to cover the costs that the traditional publishers will be covering for you by way of use of their in-house cover designers and layout artists and whatever. So that's definitely something to be thinking about. But moving right along, now we're going to take a look at the question of how you can do it yourself. And this DIY version is called self-publishing. This is where perhaps you haven't got the money to pay someone like me to do all of the project management for you, and you don't want to be bothered trying to go down the traditional route. Well, this is exactly where self-publishing comes into its own, because you can do all of the processes involved in publishing your book yourself. And this suits a lot of people because you get to maintain control of everything, including the time frame. And you're retaining all of the revenue from book sales. And you're making all of the decisions on things like what to have on the front cover. Because, for example, on the front cover of my books, I have my web address listed under my name. Because my last two books in particular are like my business cards. Now, there's no way a traditional publisher would allow me to do something like that. So self-publishing and the hybrid style of publishing are the options that I'm most likely to be recommending for my authors. But on the downside with self-publishing, There's an awful lot of work involved. And when I say that you have control of the time frame, what you have to allow for is the steep learning curve that you'll be on, because there are a lot of opportunities to get something wrong in this space. And my advice to you would be to get really well educated on what you need to do and how you need to do it, because it can be a fairly fraught activity if you don't know what you're doing. So that's just a fairly quick rundown on the 3 options to get your book published. So what I want to do now is share a couple of case studies with you. And this is one of my clients, Tracy Tully, who you see on the left-hand side of the screen. And I'm really proud that Tracy's contracted me to publish her co-authored books for her. And what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is the cover of one of those, which is called Queens in Sandcastles. Now, Tracy's opted to publish this book under her brand name, which is MRW Publishing. Now, this is another one of my clients, Rebecca Mowbray. Rebecca came to me when she'd finished writing her book, and she was wanting to tap into my editing and publishing services. And here we are. This is a screenshot of Rebecca's website, where she's proudly letting her community know that they can get her book from Amazon in Australia, as well as in the US, and through Booktopia, Angus and Robertson, Book Depository, and Barnes and Noble. Now, those are the bigger distribution outlets that Rebecca's book is available through, but it's also available through hundreds of the smaller distribution outlets. And when I say they're smaller, they're just not the mega outlets like Amazon or Barnes and Noble. But we don't want to miss out on getting your books on their websites, because they have hundreds of thousands of people buying books off them as well. So the point for us is just to make sure that we get your book distributed to as wide a range of outlets as possible, because the point is to get the book out there into the hands of the people who need to read it. Basically, we don't want you to be the world's best kept secret anymore. So pretty much that's the publishing landscape for you. And now we're going to shift gears and look at this question of how to monetize the content of your book. And you might be planning to do that by way of an online program or a coaching package, or you might be using the material in the book to put into presentations or articles or blogs. Whatever it is, this piece is important, because the truth of it is that most books don't make their authors a lot of money through sales. And frankly, the goal of most of the people who are writing their books with me is to build their profile and leverage published author status to get speaking opportunities and free publicity. And quite often, people are using their books as a lead magnet to get people into their sales funnels. Or possibly, they're like one of my authors who managed to generate over $500,000 in revenue off the back of sending copies of his book to the people he wanted to be able to organize follow-up meetings with. So there are a whole lot of ways to get a return on your investment other than just through book sales. And that said, we definitely want to make sure that we use keywords and list our authors' books using the categories that we know will help them to rank well on Amazon and places like that. But we don't want you to be relying on book sales alone. So what I want to do now is share Joel Annesley's story with you. Now, Joel is someone that I often mention because he's the very first person who did the whole 360-degree journey of writing and publishing and promoting his book with me. And what I mean by that is that he came to me with the idea of writing a book, but he didn't know where to start. And when we first met, he had a bunch of questions about how many chapters should he include and what should he include in each of the chapters, and how could he publish his book, and what should the cover look like, and how could he use the book to get people into his coaching practice. So he planned it all out with the end in mind, and I kept him accountable. And he knew that I always had his back, and that I was available to review his material if he ever wanted me to, and or have brainstorming sessions and strategy sessions. And it made me incredibly proud in 2018 when his wonderful book, Quietly Confident, Breaking Up with Shyness came out onto the market. And not long after that, he launched his quietly successful podcast and his coaching business off the back of his book. So he's come a really long way after coming to me with a full-time job and the dream of writing a book to help him launch his coaching practice so that he could eventually transition from being an employee to being a person who runs a business doing work that he is incredibly passionate about. And another example I want to share with you is Sam Lee. Now, Sam was quite the opposite to Joel. He came to me with his book already written, and he wanted help to turn the material in the book into an online program. So I sat down with Sam and asked him who his target audience was. And I went through those questions that we looked at earlier. I asked him, what are they wanting less of in their life? What are they wanting more of? And what problem does your book solve for them? And what solution is your online program going to be offering? So he told me about his target audience, and my heart sank because I had to break some pretty tough news. And what I said was, I think you've written the wrong book, Sam. And when I explained why, the penny really dropped for him. And he said, well, what are we going to do about this? And I explained that the best option was to repurpose the content in the social way with his target market in mind and develop the material for the online program at the same time. And not so long after deciding that that was the way that we were going to move forward, Sam's new book called Connect with Confidence came out onto the market. And what you're seeing on the screen is Sam running workshops with copies of his books on the table for people to buy and an upsell available for people who want to take the next step and go into his online program. And given what I said earlier about starting with the end in mind, you're probably not going to be surprised to hear that Sam's 8-chapter book translated into an 8-week online program where the participants get a chapter of the book each week with additional worksheets that Sam and I devised together, as well as 8 weekly group coaching calls. So Sam's another great example of repurposing. So I want you to really consider this. How might you be using your book to make sure that you get bang for your buck in terms of the time you put into writing it? Could you turn the material into an online program? Will you be using some of the content as blog posts or LinkedIn articles or submitting it to media outlets? I just want you to be looking a little further ahead of just having the book finished so that you don't write the wrong book like Sam did. Now we're going to move into the really exciting bit, looking at how you can leverage published author status to build your profile through speaking opportunities and free publicity. I love talking about this because it's kind of like we're looking at the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I'm going to start with the case study. This is Tim Higgs, who runs a company called Catapult LPC, and he's speaking at one of my author showcase events that I run at the State Library of New South Wales. Now, what my authors get from this opportunity is 20 minutes of footage talking about their books and their programs and themselves with the State Library of New South Wales signage clearly visible. And what people like Tim can do with their footage is they can cut it up into smaller chunks and include it in show reels or book trailers, or possibly use it in their online programs. And they can certainly be sending it off to speaker bureaus so that they'll be able to move from that space where they're not only getting unpaid speaking opportunities, but they're also able to be charging a fee to speak at events and conferences and such. And here we've got Helen Williams on the TEDx stage. So imagine how valuable that footage is going to be to Helen. And like Tim, Helen is someone who's taken published author status to a whole other level. And in the process, she's building her profile exponentially. And here's that image of me that you saw at the beginning. And this speaks to the incredible ride that I had when I finished my first book. And one of the things that happened was that I got an email in my inbox one day saying that one of our members has just read your book and recommended that we get in touch with you to organise for you to speak at our next event. And if you'd have told me that one day I'd be standing on a stage in India speaking at an event that over 2,000 women were attending, I'd have told you that you were crazy. But that's exactly what happened. And what I love most about this is that I'm now able to facilitate this for all of my female authors. So imagine what it must be like to be 1 minute struggling to even get your book written, and then a little while later, becoming an international speaker as well. So what I want to say to you is that these kind of opportunities are real, and I can help you to access them because I did the hard yards myself. And I love seeing my clients get these results without having to put in the kind of work that I had to do to get to where I am now. And another thing that I do, in addition to helping people write, publish, and promote their books through speaking opportunities, is that I help them get free publicity. And what you're seeing on the screen now is one of my clients. Her name is Alana Mae Mitchell. So Alana is another person who came to me with her book already written. And she said to me, Jane, I've downloaded my story here and I need someone to edit it for me. She said, I've got big plans, but I don't have the time or the energy to put into making this readable and marketable. Those were actually my words, to be honest. But Alana said a lot of other words that made it clear to me that she wanted her book to open up some big doors for her. And boy, has it opened up some big doors. And here she is on one of the morning shows here in Australia, where we're both based. And this one's called Studio 10. Now, I really enjoy it when someone like Alana comes along because I love to get my teeth into the raw material that people like her bring to me. And I love to pull it into the kind of shape that a producer on a show like Studio 10, for example, is going to glance at and say, yes, this woman has an incredible story to share. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you exactly what I told Alana to do so that you can do it as well. But what I want to say before I do that is that having all the information in the world isn't going to help you if you don't take action. And one of the things I'm really proud of Alana for is the fact that she followed the steps that I provided her with and she took action. And she's actually had exposure on a number of high-profile media outlets, including radio programs, and she's been on the Mamamia and Adriana Huffington's Thrive Global platforms as well. So that's Alana Mae Mitchell, who I'm really proud of. And this is Olivia Ong, who I'm incredibly proud of as well. Now, Olivia was like Joel, and like most of my clients, actually. She came to me with the idea to write a book about how self-compassion had helped her to overcome the trauma involved in a car accident that left her unable to use her legs. And like I did with Joel, Olivia and I worked together right from the beginning, all the way through writing the book, publishing the book, and promoting the book. And Olivia's new coaching practice has now been launched off the back of her book, which is called The Heart-Centeredness of Medicine. And here she is speaking on the Sky News Weekend Live edition. And like Alana, she's actually snagged way too many bits of free publicity for me to list out to you now, because what I want to do is actually turn the focus back on you. I want you to literally press the pause button and sign up to these two websites, sourcebottle.com and helpareporter.com. These are two free sites that you can sign up to. What you'll get in your inbox every day are call-outs from media outlets, because the fact of the matter is that the editors of magazines and newspapers and the producers of TV and radio shows have a black hole to fill, and they need great content to fill it with. So if you have stories that can help them in that way, then some incredible things might happen. And to prove that to you, I'm going to share what happened to me off the back of my first book, which was called Thrive in Midlife. So I answered a call out on SourceBottle that said that they were looking for someone to talk about their experience of menopause. And I answered that by saying that I've just written a book about my experience of menopause, and I'd love to help you if you think that I'm the right fit for your audience. And I attached a PDF version of the book and pressed send. Then a few days later, I got an email in my inbox saying, "Sorry about the short notice, Jane, but would you be available for a photo shoot and an interview next week?" And it was signed off by Claire Weaver, Senior Journalist, Australian Women's Weekly. Well, I tell you what, I certainly made myself available for that opportunity. And here I am with a full page coverage and an image of myself in the biggest selling magazine in Australia. So that was the first piece of fabulous publicity that I got. And the second piece was in Prevention magazine. And here I am again with a full page, including a massive image of me and my story. So both of these opportunities came through SourceBottle. But what I want to talk to you about now is how you can leverage the publicity that you get. So what I did was I aligned the cover of the issue I was in next to the page with my image on it. And I took a photo of that because the woman in the blue shirt is Deborah Hutton. And I sent the image and a pitch off to the people who managed Deborah Hutton, because at the time she had a massively subscribed online platform. So I sent the image off as an attachment to an email where I said that I was really proud to find myself in the same issue of Prevention as Deb was in. And I asked whether they thought she might be interested in interviewing me. Well, what they did was they sent me back a pro forma with a bunch of questions on it. So I filled that out. And next thing I know, they're emailing me to let me know that my story was live on the site. And here's what it looked like. So what you're seeing on the bottom left-hand corner is an image of me and the link through to my story, which also had a link through to my website, which also had a link to go and buy my book. And the person that you see in the other three boxes on this image is someone called Lisa Wilkinson. Now, at the time, Lisa Wilkinson was one of the anchors on the Today Show. So guess what I did? I took a screenshot of the image that you're looking at now, and I sent it off to the producer of the Today Show. Now, people often ask me, how did I know where to send this to? And I say, well, what I did is that I Googled Channel 9 and got their phone number. So I picked up the phone and rang the switchboard and asked the switchboard operator if they could tell me who the producer of the Today Show is and whether they could give me the contact details. And they could not have been more helpful. They said, Tom Nichols is the person you want. Here's his email address. Here's his landline. And here's his mobile. You're probably best to try the mobile because he's not at his desk very often. Now, I mean, seriously, could that have been any easier? Now, you might be thinking that I'm explaining things in a lot of detail to you here. Well, I am, frankly, because these opportunities are real. And I want you to leave this webinar knowing exactly how you can approach media outlets yourself. So I'm going to hone in even more on the strategy that I use and let you know that I always put an attachment to the email I send through. And why I do this is because these guys get hundreds of emails a day. And what I know as a person who gets a lot of emails myself is that the ones that are easiest to find when you have to trawl through your inbox are the ones with attachments on them. So I sent an email off to Tom, and it was a bit like the one I sent to Deborah Hutton's people, saying that I was proud to find myself being covered in Balance by Deborah Hutton at the same time as Lisa Wilkinson was. And I wondered if Lisa might like to interview me about my new book. So I wasn't really expecting to get a reply to that email. And the strategy I've devised doesn't rely on getting a response back from the first email. because what it relies on is making a phone call. So 3 days after I sent the email, I made the call and I went through to Tom's voicemail. Now, I didn't bother to leave a voicemail message because it's a lot better if we can get straight through to the person we want to connect with. So I rang again in the afternoon and I got through. And I said, "Hi, Tom, it's Jane Turner here. And I'm just calling to see if you've got any questions about the email I sent through to you a couple of days ago." And he said, "Oh, well, can you tell me what it's about, Jane?" So I told him basically what I said in the email. And he said, "Well, I'm just running off to a meeting now. Can I call you back later?" And of course I said, "Absolutely." But to be honest with you, there was a moment there where I thought I was getting the royal brush off. But you know what? I wasn't. He called me back and he said, "Look, this looks really interesting. Can you send me a copy of the book?" Which I did. And then I heard nothing. So I let it go for about 3 weeks and then I picked up the phone again. So what I want to say to you at this point is that you've got to be prepared to do the follow-up and you've got to be prepared to get out of your comfort zone. And boy, was I out of my comfort zone making these phone calls, but I made them anyway. So when I got through to Tom that second time, he thanked me for the book and he said, "Look, I haven't got anything at the moment, Jane, but I'll definitely keep you in mind." Now, I actually never did wind up getting on the Today Show, but I did wind up getting on Today Extra. And this is me on the screen with David Campbell and Georgie Gardner and one of their other guests. And I tell you what's amazing about the Today Extra program is that at the end of it, David Campbell says, "Now, if you want to know more about what Jane does, just follow her at writewithjane.com." And periodically through the interview, they run the web address across the bottom of the screen. So can you imagine what that kind of coverage does for someone who's written a book for the exact demographic that watches the Today Extra program? So it's just amazing to think about what's available when we're prepared to get out of our comfort zone. And when we're prepared and ready to be sending through a copy of our book or a chapter of it, or just saying that I'm the author of a book called whatever it is. And the last example I'm going to give you is another one of the wonderful opportunities that I've got through sourcebottle.com. And this is where I answered a call out about overcoming rejection. Now, this particular footage has been insanely helpful for me. I actually use it whenever I'm reaching out to potential new clients, if they're in a particular demographic that it's going to resonate with. And I'm not going to tell you any more about it now, because I just want you to watch the clip and imagine if that was you. Because the point I want to get through to you is that it could actually be you one day.
First, something we've all experienced, and every time it happens, we're reminded again how not fun it is to be rejected.
Some of the world's most successful people have been rejected. Elvis Presley was told to go away and learn to drive a truck. J.K. Rowling had 12 publishers reject her with Harry Potter. And Oprah Winfrey was told that she's too emotionally connected to her stories to be a journalist. All rejected. And aren't we glad that they were? One lady who'd had her life flipped on its head at the age of 52 is Jane Turner. Jane was retrenched from her job, where she thought she was safe for life.
I was in the public service my whole life, so I'm a person with a high value on security. Gone. What happens to you when it's gone? Immense fear. Immense fear, because I'd been in that place for 15 years. It was like family, it was like home, and the rejection buttons were being triggered all over the place.
And what happened was this. Jane is now a sought-after corporate speaker and business consultant, and as the author of 2 very popular books on how to overcome adversity, she has never been busier or happier.
The big one for me was that I wound up on a stage speaking at the Women's Economic Forum in India, a forum that has some 2,000 delegates going to it. And there's little old Jane Turner, who'd been a public servant their whole life up to the age of 52, who would still be a public servant now. But would I be as alive now? Absolutely not, Jo.
What an amazing story of how wonderful life can be on the other side.
I think it's just wonderful the way ordinary people like you and me are able to get ourselves free publicity like this off the back of writing a book. Now, you might be thinking people can do that anyway, even if they haven't written a book. And my answer to that is that yes, that's absolutely true. But what I know about you is that you've had a calling to write a book, and that's why you're on this webinar. So for people like us, it's all about writing the book, because the book will give us the clarity and the vehicle that we need to A, be able to believe in ourselves, and B, be able to leverage it in the way that Helen Williams has, and that I have, and that Olivia Ong has, and Alana May Mitchell has. So I hope that you're starting to believe that, because what I'm going to do now is remind you about why you've invested this much time in watching a webinar like this. And this is another one of those questions that I always ask at my workshops. And that question is, what are you going to be missing out on if you don't put the work into finishing your book and then go the next level of really putting yourself out there to get that message of yours out into the world? And I always hear things like this. It's about being able to make a difference, because we know that we've been put on this planet for a reason. And it's that dent in the universe that on some level, we know we've been given the gift of life to make. And it's about being able to charge what we're worth. And I see way too many people in the coaching industry in particular, not charging anywhere near what they're worth or what their competitors are charging. So once you have the book and the credibility that comes with it, I feel pretty safe in saying that in most cases, you're going to be able to increase your charges. And I know that from firsthand experience and the experience of most of the people that I work with. And this blends into this third point about being seen as the expert in your field. And as we just looked at, there's the question of getting free publicity and speaking opportunities, and being taken seriously, and being able to stop working so hard for so little, and being known as the go-to person in your field, and this question of legacy. Now, it may not necessarily resonate with you now, but I bet when you're holding that book of yours in your hand, you'll get it. You'll be having that feeling of, oh my God, I've done this. And it's that sense of purpose and satisfaction. And sadly, for some people, it actually comes down to this third point, this question of being able to sustain your business and even being able to take holidays. So what I want to do now is tell you more about how I might be able to help you. So here's what I do. As you heard earlier, I run the Power Writing Program. That's where someone comes to me who's got the idea of writing a book, and I take them right from the beginning of teasing their ideas out and putting them into a structure, all the way through to having a marketable and readable manuscript ready to go into the publishing process. And my clients might come to me somewhere along the line. Maybe they only need editing, or increasingly these days, I'm getting people coming to me for what I call my 3 Rs. Now that's rewording, rewriting, and rearranging the material that my clients bring to me to polish up. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach that we take here. It's a whatever's going to work for you approach that we take. So it's best that we hook up for a conversation and we work out exactly what's going to work to get that book of yours finished. So parallel to the Power Writing Program is the Power Writers Publishing Group. And what my clients get there is a professionally published book with international distribution. And then we have the Power Publicity and Promotion Program. And I feel like I've already told you enough about what goes on there, so I won't go into any more detail here, because what I want to focus on is the Author Business Hub. This is my newest program that I launched at the beginning of 2022. And what this is about is that a lot of my authors might be working in a job, or they might be semi-retired, or possibly they've been recently retrenched or something like that. And they're wanting to write a book to launch a new business. So I set up the Author Business Hub to make sure that they don't come out the other end as a published author and go, now what? So essentially, the Business Hub is about getting their business really humming along. And some people might opt in to stay for 6 months or 12 months, or others might just need 1 month just to get the fundamentals of their business sorted. The thing is that this is a membership site, so you can just opt in and opt out as often as you like. So I wanted to jump on before I sign off on this webinar so that you can see that I'm a real person. And I hope that I've helped you to get over some of the uncertainty that you might have felt about writing a book or publishing a book or promoting a book. And I hope that I've inspired you with some of the case studies that I've shared with you. And what I really hope is that you don't leave this webinar and do nothing. You've now invested an hour of your time, and I want you to keep that momentum going. What I'd love you to do is sign up at writewithjane.com. And what that will trigger is an email coming into your inbox with a scheduling link, so that you can find a time for us to nut out together exactly what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So it's over and out from me for now, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side.